Hi, I'm Stan Jones, creator of the Nathan Active Mysteries, and in a couple of minutes I will be reading you the first chapter of this one, Village of the Ghost Bears. It is the fourth book in the series. But first, I'd like to say a little about the term Eskimo. As you may have heard, it's being replaced in formal speech and writing by the term Inuit. However, Eskimo is still in general use in northwest Alaska, and that's the practice followed in the series. So here we go. What happens in Ghost Bears? Well, in this one, Nathan has to figure out what connects a dead hunter on a remote Arctic lake with a year-old fatal plane crash in the Brooks Range and an arson at the Chukchi Recreation Center. That fire killed 8 people, including the police chief and the town's basketball star. Active's investigation leads him to a lucrative polar bear poaching operation and a brother and sister with an intense bond from a village famous for twins, polar bears, and schizophrenia. And now, Chapter 1 of Village of the Ghost Bears. You see why they call it One-Way Lake? Cowboy Decker rolled the Super Cub into a slow arc as Alaska State Trooper Nathan Active peered over Grace Palmer's shoulder. One-Way Lake was a blue teardrop, cupped in the foothills of the Brooks Range with caribou trails lacing the ridges on either side. The outlet, One-Way Creek, lined with stunted black spruce and a few cottonwood gone gold, threaded south across the rusting fall tundra toward the Issignak River. At the lake's head, wavelets licked a fan-shaped talus under a steep slope of gray-brown shale. More caribou trails cut across its face. Grace was wearing the intercom headset, so Active was obliged to shout at the back of the pilot's head. "Looks pretty tight," he said. "Yep," Cowboy shouted back. "One way in, one way out. You land toward the cliff and take off, going away." Active lifted one of the headset cups away from Grace's ear. "What do you think?" She shifted on his lap in the cramped back seat of the Super Cub and turned her head toward him. "I'm game. Anything to get out of this damn airplane." "Let's do it," Active shouted. Cowboy leveled the wings, flew a half-mile down One-Way Creek in the slanting fall sunlight, then swung back for the approach to the lake. He came in low, floats barely clearing the treetops along the creek, chopped the power and dropped the Super Cub onto the water, throwing up spray that painted a brief rainbow in the air. Cowboy slowed to taxiing speed and pointed the nose at a spot on the bank that boasted a tiny gravel beach and a stand of spruce on high, dry ground suitable for camping. The floats crunched into the shallows and Cowboy shut off the engine, ushering in a sudden and deafening silence broken only by the slap of their own wake reaching the shore. Cowboy popped open the Super Cub's clamshell doors, letting in the smell of the Arctic, the wet, fertile rot of tundra vegetation, a hint of resin from the spruce, and something else, something sharp and cool that Active associated with autumn in the mountains near sunset. Winter, perhaps, hovering just over the ridges to the north. It was already a couple of weeks late and could not be far off. Cowboy, wearing jeans and the usual bomber jacket and baseball cap, pulled his hip waders up and jumped into the shallows. He grabbed the nose of a float, tied on a yellow polypropylene line, and dragged the plane forward a few yards, then walked into the trees and snubbed the Super Cub to a spruce. He returned to the beach and surveyed the lake with an air of great satisfaction. You get into One-Way Lake this time of year, you got caribou walking by, you got grayling in the creek, maybe some Arctic char, maybe some pike in the lake, and you got the best blueberries in the Arctic. He raised his eyebrows and grinned. "And you got total privacy. There's only a couple of guys can get in here, and you're looking at half of them." Not for the first time, Active marveled at the pilot's intuition and at his utter lack of discretion in dealing with the insights it brought him. Cowboy might sense that fishing, berry picking, and caribou hunting were the least of their reasons for coming here, but it was none of his business. "We probably ought to get unloaded," Active said. He helped Grace climb onto a float, then extricated himself from the torture chamber that is the rear seat of a Super Cub and clambered ashore, stamping and stretching to unkink his muscles. Cowboy walked onto the float and began emptying the cargo pod under the Super Cub's belly and the space behind the back seat. Food in cardboard boxes, 2 cased rifles, 2 fishing rigs, a bright orange Arctic oven tent, a Woods Yukon single-double sleeping bag, camp stove and fuel, cooking gear, and all of the other impedimenta required to support human life in the Arctic. Active and Grace ferried gear ashore until finally the plane was empty. Cowboy untied the Super Cub, waded into the shallows, walked the plane back until it floated free, then swung the nose around to point across the lake. "Okay, you two, I'll see you in a week. Enjoy yourselves, huh?" His eyes twinkled behind the steel-framed glasses, and the grin reappeared. It was not reciprocated. Cowboy shrugged. "If you run into any trouble, just set off your EPIRB, and somebody will be along to check on you." They nodded, and he climbed into the plane. He cranked up and taxied to the foot of the cliff, then turned and put on full power, filling the bowl with the roar of his engine as he accelerated down the lake. They watched as the pilot got onto step, lifted one float clear of the water, then the other, and cleared the trees at the outlet. As the red and white plane shrank to a dot in the sky, Active put his arm around Grace's shoulders, breathing in the scent of lavender. "What do you think?" She shrugged stiffly. "I don't know yet." He gave her a squeeze. "Don't sweat it. Good fishing, good hunting, good berry picking, good weather, good company. Who needs the other?" She looked at him with a quick silver flash from the corner of her eye. "Every couple does. Otherwise, they're just roommates." "Don't say that. I hate that word." "It's all right if we're roommates for a while," he said. "It'll happen when it happens." "Feel free to shop elsewhere. Thanks, but no thanks." She turned into his arms and pulled him down for a kiss. "Thank you," she said after a long time. When they separated, he cleared his throat. "I guess we should do something about getting a camp together." She nodded. "I'll organize some dinner if you want to set up the tent." She busied herself putting up a visqueen awning for the camp kitchen while he stamped about the mossy floor of the spruce grove, looking for the flattest spot big enough for the Arctic oven. He found one a few yards off, requiring only that he dig out a few rocks and pitch them aside. Then he tugged the tent out of its pouch and spread it on the moss as the sun drifted below the ridge and the basin sank into blue shadow. Later in the tent came the conundrum of the Woods single-double. Each half could be zipped into a bag for one person, or the two halves could be zipped together for a couple. "One bag or two, madam?" he asked without much optimism. He studied her face in the buttery light of the propane lantern as she turned it over in her mind. The hunger for normalcy showing as always in her eyes, the desire to please him and the dread that, if she let him take her, he'd be transformed somewhere deep in her wounded psyche into her father, who had been the first man to do so. "One, I think, kind sir, but no guarantees." Like him, she was playing it light, keeping the escape route open. "None needed." He unrolled the bag and zipped it together, stripped down to his shorts and t-shirt, and crawled in. Then he watched her next internal debate: undress with the light on or off. Put on the long johns or go for broke in panties and one of his t-shirts. She looked at him, stuck out her tongue like a 12-year-old, and closed the valve on the lantern. He listened in a kind of fever dream as the clothes whispered off in the darkness and something was pulled on, long johns or a t-shirt. She slid into the bag and he felt a smooth, hot thigh against his own. She turned toward him for a kiss. Her lips soft and wet, a flicker of her tongue, but when he slid his hand under her t-shirt, she stiffened, quivering, as usual. He eased his hand off her breast, stroked her hair, and felt her relax. He kissed her cheek and tasted salt. "Sorry, baby," she said. "All in good time. You know, I've started seeing Naldekivitz again." "Okay." She put her hand on his chest, scratched him lightly, sighed, and let the hand trail southward. "Liar." "Eh? I see things are not altogether all right down there. What are you? I think I could, oh, God." "You should register those hands with the FBI," he said a few minutes later. "They are lethal weapons." "That would explain why I won the shootout," she replied with a giggle. He laughed out loud, pleased that her joke was dirtier and more original than his own. But how to get into the real issue? Am I imagining things, or do we just have a breakthrough? Progress, at least. She shifted and put her head on his chest. He was silent for a time. What do you think accounts for it? It's just different out here. I don't know. Maybe it's being out of that house. He stiffened again. Don't overanalyze it. Leave it be. I withdraw the remark, Your Honor. Noted. A long moment passed, then she relaxed again and rolled toward him a bit. The tent was filled with the smells of lavender sex and his own sweat now cooling. It was nice, but it does seem a bit one-sided, he ventured at length. Anything I can do to reciprocate? She shrugged. Someday, maybe. For now, your pleasure is my pleasure. He flipped back the sleeping bag to cool off, and, now that his eyes had adjusted, to admire the curve of her calf thrown across his thigh in the dim light seeping in from the evening sky. You know something? She was serious suddenly. He was drowsy and hoped this wouldn't get too deep. You're so polite. He tried to stay drowsy, thinking they could work this out tomorrow. Whatever it was, but so polite? He opened his eyes, resigned to it. Meaning? I mean, you keep trying, but not too hard. Sometimes I'm not sure how much you want me. With my past, I could understand. Well, I mean, my God, look at you. You're the most beautiful. What man wouldn't? She was silent, slightly tense against his side and chest. Are you saying you want to be taken? I don't know. Maybe it's what I need. Some women do. By force? Sometimes, if it's someone they trust, they want to be wanted that much. Are you one of those women? I don't know. I want to be normal is all. I just don't know what that is. Her hand drifted south again, but I see the idea interests you at least a little. Of course, he moved the hand back to his chest. But I'm not the caveman type. For us, what we have is normal, for now. Well then, have some more of it on me. She rolled over and kissed him, hard, her hand moving south again. This time, he let it roam. And that is the first chapter of Village of the Ghost Bears, fourth novel in the Nathan Active series. I hope you liked it.